Hi everybody, I'm having a nightmare with this phone. Um, when you're doing a video, you should be able to turn it facing me and away from me. And once I press the video button, it's facing me. It won't let me turn these away. I'll tell you why, right? Because last night I said that I would read a piece of the 60s book. And I thought I would start off with a foreword that was written by Spencer Robinson. It just means that I'll have to keep the phone like this and you just have to watch me read, which takes me back to the days when I used to do lectures and I used to have faces staring up at me from those tiered desks or staring down at me, rather. And I never felt very comfortable at that either. So what I have to keep in mind is you're not all on at the one time, okay? And I don't know when you'll see it. And when you do see it, you'll be watching it probably on your own. So this is only going to let me record with this facing me. I've moved rooms. I've come out to the kitchen because it's, because I had a table and because I lost the stand from my phone and I've had to rig up this thing with my iPad stand. I've put the boot on it to balance it. I'm trying not to lean my elbow too much on this table. I'll end up with a dead arm. But anyway, it will all be worth it. So this is the Bee Gees book. This is the decades. You see that? And it's the Bee Gees in the 60s. And this couple of pages I'm going to read is Spencer's foreword. Now, you'll have to excuse me, looking at the book and not looking at yourselves when I'm reading. Oh, it's so awkward. Anyway, here goes nothing. Spencer Gibb. When I was first asked to write the foreword, I must admit I was a little intimidated. Not because of the subject matter itself, because I assumed that it would be just as hard for me to discuss the Bee Gees on an impersonal level as to attempt the opposite. I then had an epiphany of sorts. It turns out I do it all the time. I reference them often when I'm producing or engineering a record for someone or working on my own material, or even when I'm teaching a class on the music business, songwriting, or production. The brothers Gibb are naturally ingrained in me, but not specifically as family. I've realised that I've always been able to separate the music and the talent from my personal relationships. I judge their achievements for what they are. This is important because I feel that's what every musician, performer, producer, and especially songwriter should be doing. I'm often asked, usually because I'm related, how the Bee Gees have influenced me. My response is always, how are they not influencing you? And if they're not, then you need to start listening. Sounds like a bit of Robin in there, doesn't it? Of course, I'd be lying if I said there weren't personal exceptions. Losing my Uncle Andy and the music his brothers wrote relating to that will touch me forever. Yeah, there are certain songs that connect to my parents' divorce, and naturally many others that occurred at a pivotal time in my life. My dad playing me nights on Broadway is one of my earliest memories. And I have a humorous virginity story related to You Win Again that I won't share now. I could go on and on. Don't get me wrong. As someone who chose a career as a musician, songwriter and producer, I did have the luxury of a front row seat to not just some of the best recordings of all time, but the opportunity to discuss these elements with many of the people involved. Of course, that includes the Gibb brothers themselves, each with their individual perspectives. And legends and great minds, such as Arif Mardin, Albie, Glutton, I can't pronounce the surname. I thought it said Glutton when I first looked at it. Brian Tench, Femi Jaya, and so many others over the years. Another question I often get is, how do you live up to your family? The teenage artist in me definitely felt like I was in their shadow. But the adult answer is, you don't. Or you can't. The truth is, nobody can live up to them. The Bee Gees are a truly unique phenomenon. There are no other artists in history that have achieved what they accomplished, not only because of their history of decades working together, but also because they were the first to achieve so many milestones at the height of their career, when many or all of their hugely successful predecessors or peers had either broken up or faded away. For example, the Beatles or Elvis Presley. They went on to become the biggest artists of a generation. They broke world records, including the greatest number of songs in the top 10 at one time, the number of including the number of songs in the top 10 at one time, the number of weeks on a top 10 singles chart, and of course, the biggest selling album of all time, until it was surpassed by Michael Jackson's Thriller a few years later. Itself a record that might not have existed without the impact of the Gibb brothers. The obvious downside of being the first to achieve something is that there is no rule book. It meant they were also the first artists to experience a public backlash for their success. Sadly, in my opinion, they were unfairly labelled as the face of disco, a genre I personally believe they weren't even a part of. That rule book they were never given ended up becoming the one they inadvertently wrote. It served as a roadmap for so many other artists in the years to come, including myself. The knowledge that things can turn on a dime. Understandably, being the first to experience something like this, the brothers were hurt, professionally, artistically, and personally. Nonetheless, where others might have disbanded or quit entirely, the Bee Gees persevered and endured. And as they had before, they reinvented themselves. They wrote and produced countless hits for other artists and then regrouped as performers, only to have more and more success in the decades to follow. If my father and my Uncle Morris were still alive today, there would be, without a doubt, new BG records still being released. Regardless of that, to this day, and depending on the chart or list you're looking at, you can often see them listed as the most successful songwriters of all time. I believe that this is the achievement and legacy they would care about the most. I agree with that, Spencer, actually. Their songs are still being covered or released, documentaries are being made, and a movie is in the works. This book, the first of a forthcoming series, is important for so many reasons, and I'll name a few. I feel others will hit you as you read. One is that it needed to be written and should probably have been written a long time ago. The reference to my earlier point, There are no other artists in modern history to have written and recorded together over multiple decades. So breaking that down doesn't just deserve to be documented, it is vital. Another, and this is me being a little nerdy as an engineer producer, is that this book breaks down every record track by track with backstory and details from a time when studio technology was changing almost daily. Producers, artists, and engineers were striving tirelessly every day to come up with new sounds and new standards. Who better to follow than the career of these brothers and the teams in which they worked? They were present at the infancy of modern recording and were a part of the innovations that took us into the digital age. Perfectionists who achieved the goal of discovering and changing sounds. I once witnessed a session where my Uncle Barry was producing a vocal part my father was singing. It sounded flawless to me, but Barry wasn't happy. He made my dad do it again. And honestly, I couldn't tell the difference. But Barry was ultimately satisfied. They then swapped roles, and Robin began supervising Barry's performance. Identical story. Those brothers understood things about each other, heard things in each other, and drove each other in a way that's probably impossible for most people to understand. All of this from three brothers who couldn't read or write music, but instead relied on gut feeling, intuition, and passion. And they weren't short of that. My last point is that this book gives an insight into the brothers' process and so much more. It's something that will appeal to multiple audiences. If you're interested in recording and the history behind it, you'll learn something. If you're interested in the history behind it, you'll learn something. If you're interested in music history in general, you'll learn something. If you were already a Bee Gees fan and thought you knew a lot, then I guarantee there are many things that you'll discover, maybe even something about a closet favourite song of yours that wasn't a huge hit. Finally, if you weren't a fan to begin with, or didn't know too much about their history, then I believe there's even more of a reason to read this book. I promise it will make you want to listen to them. When I was initially asked to write this, the premise was for a single book from the authors that would cover the entirety of the Bee Gees' career. Since then, it's evolved into multiple volumes that will cover different eras, which in my mind is absolutely the right decision. I said the same thing when they talked about the movie. I said it should be a mini-series. They're not going to do it justice, cramming everything that those lads did in like a 2-hour movie. They're not. Anyway, that's besides the point. Get back to Spencer. Yeah, he said this is absolutely the right decision, considering everything I've previously mentioned. The career of these brothers is so unique, long, and extraordinary that a single book or documentary couldn't do it complete justice. True. Once I found out there would be a book series, I went back to rewrite this and tailor it for this specific volume. Other than the addition of this paragraph, I decided not to. While some of what I wrote is not related to the Bee Gees' 1960s era, I believe it serves as an introduction to the series and who they were as artists and professionals, regardless of the decade. Because I was not alive for this period of their career and have no fly-in-the-wall experience. I can appreciate this era through stories that have passed down to me, but mostly as just a music lover and audio geek. witnessing music history unfold just by listening. This was the beginning of a decades-long career covering revolutions in recording technology, a time when managers and labels nurtured and developed talent because they had nothing to lose. Dramatic shifts in how radio and promotion in general were handled. The early days of artists being able to write for themselves as well as other people. The ups and downs of being a family while dealing with the fame and success for the first time. An incredible insight into not only what was the dawn of the modern music industry, but also a pivotal understanding of the dynamics and evolution of these three brothers and what the Bee Gees ultimately became. The three authors that have come together to create this project have left no stone unturned. In addition to getting to the bottom of all the information they could about these tracks, sessions and albums spanning multiple decades, they've also created a narrative that will make you feel closer to the Bee Gees and undoubtedly have a new perspective on the music, the story and the legacy. I may have been intimidated. I may have been intimidated to write this at first, but I sign off being proud to have been asked. I am Spencer Gibb. Yep, my dad was Robin fucking Gibb. Austin, Texas, USA, May 2021. Now, isn't that? I mean, he covered everything, didn't he, Spencer? He sort of touched on what we're probably going to experience in these books. Mostly, I think, the records and how they came to be and the background behind them. From what I've read so far, they don't touch that much on the personal side. They throw a few little things in. I think I earmarked something else here that interested me. I think I mentioned this last night, actually. And if I'm right, I have earmarked it. This is when they were young, when they just moved to Manchester. Right, shortly after going to Manchester from the Isle of Man, the children were all enrolled in Oswald Road School. Leslie and Barry, recorded as Barry with an IE in the admissions register, in the junior school on the 5th of September, and Robin and Morris in the infant school on the same date. So they all started school the same day. Oh, sweet. Barry recalled having a very bad experience at school, evoking a memory of a teacher who he felt was particularly unkind to children as the reason for dodging school and being chased by the truant officer who would, on occasion, come knocking on the Gibb family door. Conversely, Robin called his days at Oswald Road School quite differently. I enjoyed my time at Oswald Road. It was the first school where I made really good friends. Living in a semi-detached house at 51 Keppel Road in the middle-class South Manchester suburb of Chorlton-cum-Hardy, the Gibb family were still struggling to make ends meet. Hugh was working 2 jobs, while Barbara also worked full part-time. However, life for the Gibb children was one of fun, exploration, and occasionally mischief. Barry says, "We were street kids. Our parents had no control over us. I had a great fear of the law, which you did have in those times, but I was also very rebellious. Life on the street became more fun, and we wouldn't come home until 11 or 12 at night, because in the summers it didn't get dark until 11 o'clock at night. So kids my age didn't go home. We'd be on the streets every night." Robin was disarmingly candid with his recollections. He says, "I was a little swine, actually. I didn't know it at the time, but I look back now and I know I was for the things I did. They put kids in reform school. I was the same as Barry. We used to go out and set fire to golf courses and things like that. We never did anything that could have harmed people, but we did a lot of damage to open land. We were very young and came from the kind of area where we weren't the only kids like that. My best friend, who lived down the road from us in Northern Grove in Manchester, in number 57, went with us. We used to go into houses that had been vacated and do a lot of wrecking. Jesus. My friend was found the following day walking down the road and was picked up and sent to reform school because he'd had a previous record. Barry and I went to court, but we were put on probation. Now, this is Robin's own words. Now, when we watch them being interviewed, it's only Barry that ever admits to probation. Robin doesn't mention it, but Barry quite proudly says, I got 2 years probation, but Robin doesn't tell that he did as well. So that was interesting. Morris, however, always made it clear that his elder brother's problem with the police did not include him. No. I was the goody-goody, really. I never got into any bother. Once, I stole a bottle of orange juice at the store, but I got caught. It was the first and the last time I ever nicked anything. Abandoned car wrecks and advertising billboards were all fair game to the boys, but Hugh and Barbara's blissful ignorance of their son's activities came to a sudden end when the local police came knocking, citing Robin as the culprit who had burned down 3 or 4 sheds at the back of a butcher's shop. With threats of being sent to reform school, the brothers' well-documented activities as junior arsonists were no more. Thankfully, Barry, Robin and Morris's attention turned to other, less destructive hobbies, at least for now, and their parents' adoration of music began to surface in their young sons. Oh, that's all I'm going to read tonight because that's 22 minutes and I think that's long enough. But yeah, isn't it so interesting? I don't know why this won't let me turn these around. But anyway, I got through it. Sweating a little, nerves. But I hope you enjoyed that or stayed awake for that. But I just thought you'd be interested. Maybe it would make you want to go out and buy the book. And I'll come on again if you have no problem with that. And I'll read some other things from it, which are quite funny and some eye-openers. So for now, I can put my stand away and go in and relax in my normal chair that you see me sitting in. Oh, stretch. God, kitchen chairs, have they ever made comfortable? So that's everything, I think. And I will chat to you again soon, or maybe I'll just read from the BeeGees book or something. Let me know if you want to hear more. I won't be offended if you say no, honestly. I don't offend that easily. So take care, all of you, and I will chat soon. Bye.